I had always dreamed of spending summers at the cabin my grandparents left me. Nestled in the woods, it was a perfect getaway until the HOA got involved. After my grandfather passed away, I decided to visit the cabin for the first time in years. I was filled with excitement and nostalgia, but I had no idea what awaited me. As I approached the cabin, I noticed something off. The lawn was overgrown, and a notice of violation was plastered on the door. I rolled my eyes. Of course, the HOA didn't waste any time. I unlocked the door only to find the interior in shambles. Someone had clearly been using it without permission. I quickly called the police, hoping they could help me figure out what was going on. Just as I was on the phone, a woman stormed up the driveway. It was Karen, the self-appointed HOA enforcer. "What are you doing here? This property is under HOA regulations," she shouted, hands on her hips. I tried to explain that the cabin was mine, but she cut me off. "You can't just return here. You're in violation of the rules." Her face was red with anger. Before I could respond, the police arrived. They immediately noticed the locks on the cabin door, new and without my knowledge. "Ma'am," one officer said to Karen, "do you have permission to change these locks?" Karen stammered, Well, I thought—" The officers exchanged glances. "You can't just change locks on someone else's property. This is a serious issue." As they questioned her, I felt a mix of relief and disbelief. Karen was losing her grip. The officers soon realized she had taken it upon herself to enforce HOA rules in a way that crossed the line. With the evidence stacked against her, they placed her in handcuffs. "You're under arrest for trespassing and tampering with someone's property," one officer said. I stood there, heart racing as Karen was led away, her protests echoing in the woods. "You'll regret this!" she yelled. But I felt a wave of vindication. As I finally stepped into my cabin, I knew it was time to reclaim my family's legacy, one Karen wouldn't be able to touch again. The summer was mine, and I was ready to make new memories, free from the clutches of the HOA. As the police escorted Karen away, I felt a mix of satisfaction and disbelief. The cabin, once a cherished part of my childhood, had become a battleground between me and the HOA. But today, I was winning. After the officers confirmed my ownership, they took the time to inspect the cabin. I could see their expressions change as they surveyed the damage. Old furniture had been replaced with mismatched pieces, and it was clear someone had been squatting. "Do you want to press charges?" one officer asked. I hesitated. I didn't want to escalate things further, but I also didn't want this to happen again. "Let's just file a report for now," I replied. "I want to get things sorted out, but don't want to make it worse." As the officers finished up, I took a deep breath and surveyed the cabin. The memories rushed back. Summers spent fishing, hiking, and laughing with my family. I felt the weight of those memories pressing down on my heart, but I also felt a renewed sense of purpose. This place was mine now, and I had to protect it. Once the police left, I decided to do a little cleaning. I couldn't stand the thought of anyone else's presence lingering in my family's space. As I worked, I found old photos tucked away in drawers, snapshots of my grandparents, sun-soaked days and laughter echoing through the woods. Just as I was starting to feel at home again, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from a neighbor, someone I vaguely remembered from childhood. "Heard about the incident. Karen is relentless. She'll be back," I sighed. It was just like her to cause trouble. But this time, I wouldn't back down. I called the neighbor back and asked for advice. They suggested I attend the next HOA meeting to address the situation directly. The next week, I found myself standing at a long table surrounded by people I barely knew, including Karen, who sat glaring at me. I took a deep breath and shared my story, detailing the events of that day and how I had inherited the cabin. Karen interrupted, claiming I was violating HOA rules by not maintaining the property. "You can't just leave it abandoned," she shouted. I stood my ground. "I didn't abandon it. I was away grieving my grandfather. This is my family's legacy, and I intend to take care of it." The crowd murmured, some in support, others unsure. I could see Karen's fury boiling over, but I pressed on. "I want to work with the HOA, but I won't tolerate harassment or threats. I've got the police report to back me up." After a tense back and forth, the board voted on the matter. Karen's influence was strong, but the tide was shifting. They decided to investigate my claims further and put a temporary hold on any violations against me. As I left the meeting, I felt a surge of hope. I had taken a stand, and for the first time, I felt like I was on the right path to reclaiming my family's legacy. That summer, I spent every weekend at the cabin, fixing it up and making it my own. I painted the walls, cleared the garden, and even hosted a small BBQ for the neighbors. Slowly but surely, I started forming new connections and friendships, showing them that the cabin was a place of joy, not conflict. Karen, on the other hand, seemed to retreat into the shadows. Her power diminished. I heard whispers that she was losing support within the HOA, and I couldn't help but smile. As summer faded into fall, I realized that the cabin was more than just a place. It was a symbol of resilience. I had fought for it, and in doing so, I had found my voice. No longer would I let anyone take away my family's history. This was my home, and I was here to stay. As the first leaves began to turn, I found myself deeply entrenched in my cabin renovation project. Each task filled me with a sense of accomplishment, and I was finally transforming the cabin into a space that honored my grandparents while also reflecting my own style. One evening, while I was painting the porch, a familiar face appeared. It was Lucy, my childhood neighbor, and a friendly smile spread across her face. "I heard you're fixing up the old place," she said, her eyes sparkling with nostalgia. We spent the afternoon reminiscing about summers spent swimming in the nearby lake and exploring the woods. Lucy had returned to the area after moving away, and we quickly fell back into our old camaraderie. She shared stories of her own battles with the HOA, and I realized I wasn't alone in this fight. As we chatted, Lucy mentioned a community get-together planned for the upcoming weekend. "You should come. It'll be a great way to meet everyone and show them the cabin," she encouraged. I hesitated at first, but the thought of connecting with more neighbors, especially after my confrontation with Karen, made me reconsider. I agreed to join, eager to share my vision for the cabin and foster some goodwill. The day of the gathering arrived, and I found myself nervous but excited. As I arrived, I was greeted by a warm atmosphere filled with laughter and the smell of grilled food. Neighbors mingled, sharing stories and enjoying each other's company. I introduced myself to several people, and to my surprise, many were already familiar with my situation. "We're so glad you're back," one man said. "Karen has had too much control over this neighborhood for too long." As the sun began to set, I gathered a small group around me and shared my plans for the cabin. I spoke about restoring the garden, hosting community events, and even starting a small book club. The more I spoke, the more engaged they became. "Count me in for the book club," an elderly woman named Marjorie chimed in, her eyes twinkling. Others expressed interest in helping with the garden and organizing potlucks. It felt liberating to connect with these people, and I realized I was building a network of support. The evening culminated in laughter, stories, and a sense of belonging I hadn't felt in years. As I drove home that night, I reflected on how far I had come. The cabin was no longer just a place tied to memories of my past. It was becoming a vibrant part of my present and future. The following week, I decided to host a small gathering at the cabin. I sent out invitations to everyone I had met at the community event. I envisioned a cozy evening filled with good food, laughter, and camaraderie. When the day arrived, I was filled with excitement and a bit of anxiety. Would they come? Would they enjoy themselves? To my delight, the cabin was filled with laughter and chatter as neighbors arrived, each bringing a dish to share. We gathered around the fire pit, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. It was magical to see the space come alive with joy and connection. As the evening wore on, someone brought up Karen. "What's the latest on her?" a man asked, and the group erupted in a mix of laughter and groans. "I heard she tried to complain about the noise last week, but no one took her seriously." Lucy laughed. "It's about time the neighborhood stood up to her nonsense." Encouraged by the camaraderie, I shared my story about the police incident and the HOA meeting. The neighbors listened intently, nodding in agreement and sharing their own experiences with Karen. That night, I felt a renewed sense of community, one that pushed back against the negativity Karen had fostered. It was clear that the tide had turned, and I was at the center of it. As the weeks passed, I continued to build on this newfound friendship. We organized weekend cleanups, shared gardening tips, and even started a monthly coffee morning for everyone to catch up. Then one day, as I was pruning the garden, I spotted Karen approaching from a distance. My heart raced, but I took a deep breath. This time I was ready. "Can I help you?" I called out, forcing a smile. Karen scoffed, but I could see the you. After years of being away, I finally returned to the cabin my grandparents had left me. Nestled deep in the woods, it was a sanctuary of childhood memories, fishing, hiking, and laughter. But the moment I stepped onto the property, something felt wrong. The first hint was the overgrown lawn, where wildflowers had taken over the once trimmed grass. As I approached the door, a notice of violation from the HOA caught my eye, tacked unceremoniously onto the front door. My heart sank. I had heard rumors about the local HOA being a bit overzealous, but I never imagined they'd put up a violation notice on my family's cabin. Chapter 2. The confrontation. With a deep breath, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The familiar scent of pine greeted me, but the interior was not as I remembered. Furniture had been moved, and it looked like someone had been living there. Just as I pulled out my phone to call the police, I heard footsteps outside. I turned to see Karen, the notorious HOA enforcer, marching toward me. Her expression was one of triumph mixed with annoyance. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, hands on her hips. "This cabin is in violation of HOA rules." I was taken aback. "This is my family's property. I have every right to be here." Karen scoffed. "You can't just abandon it and expect it to be kept up. You need to follow the rules." "I didn't abandon it. I was grieving my grandfather." "You don't get to dictate what I do with my property," I replied, my frustration boiling over. Chapter 3. The police arrive. Before I could say more, Karen flipped open her phone and called the police. "Yes, there's a squatter in my neighborhood," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. I couldn't believe it. This woman was going to get me arrested for simply returning to my inheritance? A few minutes later, the police arrived, and my heart raced. The officers approached us, and I explained the situation. They noticed the locks on the door were new and demanded to know who had changed them. Karen, looking flustered, mumbled something about protecting the property. "Ma'am, you can't just change the locks on someone else's property without permission," one officer said, his brow furrowed. Chapter 4. The turning point. The officers began to investigate. It became clear that Karen had crossed the line. They examined the violation notice and the state of the cabin. "This looks like a case of harassment," one officer concluded, turning to Karen. "You're under suspicion of trespassing and tampering with someone's property." Karen's face contorted in rage. "This is ridiculous. I'm just trying to enforce the rules." The officers handcuffed her as she shouted in disbelief. I stood there, a mix of triumph and relief washing over me. It felt surreal to see her being taken away, her power crumbling before my eyes. Chapter 5. A new beginning once. The officers confirmed my ownership. They assured me I wouldn't face any charges. I breathed a sigh of relief as they left, but I knew I had to take action to protect my property from Karen's meddling. Over the next few weeks, I took the time to clean up the cabin and restore it to its former glory. I connected with friendly neighbors who welcomed me back and shared their stories about Karen's antics. They had all felt her wrath at some point. With their support, I decided to attend the next HOA meeting to address the situation directly. I wanted to ensure that no one else would have to deal with Karen's overreach. Chapter 6. The HOA meeting. The night of the HOA meeting arrived, and I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. As I entered the room, I noticed Karen sitting in the corner, her arms crossed and a scowl on her face. When it was my turn to speak, I shared my experience of returning to my cabin and the harassment I faced. I detailed how Karen had changed the locks and called the police on me despite my rightful ownership. The crowd murmured, and I could see several people nodding in agreement. It turned out Karen had a reputation for being overbearing, and they were tired of her antics, too. With the support of my neighbors, the board voted to investigate the situation. They decided to impose stricter rules on how complaints were handled, ensuring that no one could misuse their power like Karen had. Chapter 7. Moving Forward in. The months that followed, I continued to restore the cabin, hosting gatherings and inviting neighbors over for barbecues and bonfires. The sense of community grew, and I felt a renewed connection to my family's legacy. Karen, on the other hand, found her influence waning. The board had made it clear that her behavior was unacceptable, and she was forced to back off. One sunny afternoon, as I sat on the porch enjoying the view, I spotted her walking by. Instead of hostility, I waved, a smile on my face. To my surprise, she hesitated but eventually nodded back. While we would never be friends, I realized that standing up for myself had created a more peaceful environment for everyone. The cabin was once again a place of joy, free from the clutches of the HOA's self-appointed enforcer.